My name is Raymond. I am 63 years old, a retired high school principal, and for 11 days last February, I lay in a hospital bed in Columbus, Ohio, with a machine breathing for me while the people I had spent my entire life protecting divided up everything I owned. They spoke freely. They laughed. They made plans. What none of them knew was that somewhere behind the silence and the sedation, I was listening to every single word. Before I tell you what I heard and what I did about it, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever discovered that the version of you someone shows in public is completely different from the version they reveal when they believe you cannot hear them. It was a Tuesday evening in late February when the paramedics broke down my front door. I know it was Tuesday because I had just finished grading a set of essays for the GED prep course I volunteered for at the community center. I had been retired for 3 years, and I had discovered that doing nothing made me feel old in a way that working never had. So I kept myself useful. Tuesdays and Thursdays at the center, Wednesdays at the public library reading program, weekends whenever my daughter Camille called and needed a babysitter for my grandchildren. I had been having headaches for about a week. I mentioned it to my physician at an appointment 11 days prior, and he noted my blood pressure was elevated, prescribed a mild adjustment to my medication, and told me to reduce sodium. I went home, threw away the bag of pretzels I had been eating, and assumed the matter was resolved. It was not resolved. The aneurysm ruptured at approximately 7:40 p.m. I remember the sensation of the room tilting. I remember the essays scattering across the kitchen floor. I remember reaching for the counter and finding it already gone. I do not remember anything after that for a long time. My wife, Dolores, passed away 8 years ago from a long illness. We had been married for 31 years. After her death, I raised my 2 children in the same house we had bought together: Camille, 37, a school administrator, and my son Marcus, 34, who worked in insurance sales in Cincinnati. I say I raised them after Dolores died, but what I mean is I kept the structure of their lives standing. They were adults when she passed. What I really did was grieve alongside them, hold the family dinners together, and try very hard to be 2 parents in one body. I was not always successful, but I tried. Camille lived 20 minutes away from the house. She called every Sunday and dropped by on holidays with her husband, Dennis, and their 2 children, Ava, 9, and Junior, 7. Junior was named after her mother's father, not after me, but he looked so much like me at that age that it sometimes caught me off guard in a way I did not know how to explain. Marcus lived 90 minutes away. He called less often. He had gone through a difficult divorce 4 years prior and had never quite regained his footing after it. He was charming when he was present and absent when he was not. I had accepted that about him the way you accept things about people you love, not without grief, but without conditions. I had a house worth approximately $280,000 in a neighborhood that had appreciated significantly since Dolores and I bought it in 1994. I had a retirement account with a balance near $340,000. I had a life insurance policy that had been sitting in a folder in my file cabinet for 20 years. I had never spoken to my children at length about any of this, because I was 63 years old and did not believe it was urgent. This was the first mistake. I was told that I was found on the kitchen floor by my neighbor, Patricia Osei, who noticed my front light had not come on by 8 o'clock, which was unusual. Patricia is 71 years old, a retired pharmacist, and the neighbor people write about in obituaries as a model of what community should be. She called 911 and then held my hand until the paramedics arrived. The aneurysm had caused a serious brain hemorrhage. The emergency surgery at Ohio State Medical Center took 6 hours. When it was over, I was placed in a medically induced coma to allow my brain to rest and reduce swelling. My neurosurgeon, Dr. Amara Pettigrew, would later tell me that the outcome could have been much worse, and that Patricia's timing had been critical. I owe Patricia Osei my life. I want that stated clearly before anything else. Camille arrived at the hospital the night of the surgery. Marcus drove up from Cincinnati the following morning. I know these details because they were told to me later. I was not present in any meaningful way during that first 24 hours. But somewhere between day 3 and day 4, something shifted. The science of what happened, I cannot fully explain. I have read about residual awareness in medically induced comas, about patients who report hearing conversations that were later confirmed by the people who spoke them, about the gap between what doctors can measure on monitors and what patients later describe experiencing. What I know is what I heard. I heard it the way you hear voices in a room when you are very nearly asleep, not with full clarity, not with the sharp edges of full consciousness, but clearly enough. The way you hear your name called from downstairs and know it is real even as your eyes are still closed. The first thing I heard that registered as meaningful was Camille's voice. She was speaking to someone I later understood was Marcus, and she was crying. The crying was real. I had heard Camille cry enough times over the course of her life to know when it was grief and when it was something else. This was grief. I did not doubt that. But then the grief shifted, the way conversations sometimes do when the acute pain passes and the practical mind takes over. Dennis thinks we should get someone to look at the house, she said, just to have a number. In case. A pause. In case of what? Marcus asked. In case this goes long. In case we need to make decisions. Another pause. Longer. I mean, it's a lot of house for one person, Marcus said. It always was. Silence. He has the retirement account, Camille said. I know we're not supposed to talk about this yet, but Dennis said the account alone if something happens between the two of us. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to finish it. Lying completely still, my hands did not move. The monitors did not spike. Whatever was happening behind my eyes, my body was not reporting it. I listened. Honesty requires me to say what I felt in those first moments of awareness. Not anger. Not immediately. Something closer to confusion is the disoriented feeling of a person who has woken somewhere unexpected and needs a moment to understand where they are. I knew I was in a hospital. I knew I was not well. I did not fully understand the extent of what had happened to me, and I had no way to communicate any of this. What I had was hearing. And over the following days, as the sedation was gradually reduced and my brain worked to reclaim itself, my hearing sharpened while my body stayed still. I became what I had always been in my professional life, a listener. In 30 years of running a school, the skill I had developed most carefully was the ability to hear what people said when they thought no one was paying attention. That is where the truth lives. Not in what people say to your face, but in what they say to each other in hallways and parking lots and waiting rooms. Without having asked for it, I was now positioned in the center of the most honest conversation my family had ever had. By day 5, Camille had brought Dennis to the hospital. I knew his voice well, low and careful, the voice of a man who measures words before spending them. He was an accountant. I had always respected him, if not entirely warmed to him. They sat on what I understood was the left side of my room. I could not see them. I could not turn my head. But sound carries in hospital rooms with a strange clarity. Something about the hard surfaces, the absence of soft furnishings, the silence underneath everything. The policy is straightforward, Dennis said. We'd want to get the beneficiary situation clarified before. Before what? Camille asked. Before it gets complicated. Marcus has his issues. You know that. He's my brother. I know. But the last time he had money. I know what happened, Camille said sharply. Then, softer, I know. A pause. I'm not saying anything has to be decided today, Dennis said. I'm saying we should understand what we're dealing with. Your father never wrote things down clearly. You've said that yourself. He has a will. He showed it to me years ago. And has he updated it since your mother died? Have you seen it recently? Silence. Camille, Dennis said. I love your father. I do. But we have 2 kids and a mortgage, and if something happens here, nothing is going to happen. If something happens, I need to know we're protected. That's all I'm saying. I heard Camille make a sound that was not quite agreement and not quite refusal. The sound of a person being slowly repositioned. Lying in that bed, I thought about Dennis. About Thanksgiving when he had sat at my table and eaten my cooking and called me Ray. About the way he shook my hand at his wedding and said he was glad to be part of the family. I thought about what I had not written down. About what I had assumed did not need writing because people who loved each other understood each other. I had been a principal for 30 years. I knew better than this. Day 7. Marcus came alone. He sat closer to me than Dennis did. I could tell by the proximity of his voice, the way I could hear the scrape of the chair legs when he pulled it to the bedside. He did not say much at first. He sat. I heard him breathing. Then, very quietly, he said, Dad, I messed up. The tone told me immediately he was not talking about the hospital. He had said it too quietly, with too much certainty. He was talking to himself, the way people talk when they need to confess something and there is no one awake to confess it to. I already called someone, he said. About the house. I know I shouldn't have. I know that's not what I know. A long pause. I needed to know what it was worth. That's all. I'm not going to do anything without talking to Camille. But my situation, Dad. My situation is bad right now. You don't know how bad. He stopped talking. I heard him stand up and walk to the window. I need this to work out, he said, to no one. To me. To whatever version of me he could speak to without consequence. I need something to work out. He left 20 minutes later. Lying in the hospital bed, I thought about Marcus at 9 years old, crying at the back of the church at his grandmother's funeral because he did not want anyone to see him crying. He had always been too proud for his own good. Over the years, I had tried to soften that tendency in him. I had not entirely succeeded. I thought about his divorce, about the money he had borrowed from me afterward, $18,000, which he had never fully repaid and which I had never pushed on, because pushing felt more humiliating than the debt. What it meant about the gap, the dangerous, expensive gap between what my family assumed was settled and what I had actually put in writing. The silence I had created. 30 years of watching people under pressure had taught me to recognize exactly what I was watching. I also knew that good intentions and beneficial outcomes are not the same thing. I had seen too many students derailed by parents who meant well. I had seen too many families fractured by decisions made in grief before grief had finished doing its work. The question was not what my children intended. The question was what I was going to do about it. Day 9. This was the day I understood the full shape of the problem. Patricia Osei came to visit. She brought flowers, I know, because I heard the cellophane rustling and the nurse thanking her, and she sat in the room and talked to me as if I were fully present, which I almost was. Your children were here earlier, she said. That daughter of yours is strong. She's going to be all right. A pause. I'm not so sure about the boy, she said. He had a man with him today. I heard them in the hall. Something about a property assessment. Marcus had brought someone. Not just making a call, had brought someone to the hospital. This was a different order of magnitude than a phone inquiry. I didn't like the look of it, Patricia said. But it's not my business. Another pause. I just wanted you to know someone is paying attention. Your neighbor is paying attention. She stayed for another hour, telling me about her garden and her grandchildren and a documentary she had watched about the restoration of wetlands in Louisiana, and I was grateful for every word of it. Not because the words mattered, but because her voice was the first voice in 9 days that was not calculating anything. Day 10. The sedation was being reduced. My neurological responses were improving. Dr. Pettigrew visited that morning and asked the nursing staff to note that I was showing increased brain activity indicators. She did not know I had been showing increased brain activity for the better part of a week. That afternoon, Camille and Marcus were in the room together. The estate attorney said we should start thinking about power of attorney. Camille said, if he doesn't improve, someone needs to be able to make decisions. I know, Marcus said. She said between the two of us, it should probably be joint. So neither of us can do anything without the other. A pause. That makes sense, Marcus said. His voice was careful. She also asked about the house. Whether we knew what Dad wanted to do with it. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know. A pause. Which is true, Marcus. He never said. Silence. He said once he'd want to stay in it as long as possible, Marcus said. But that was a long time ago. The market is good right now, Camille said. Then, immediately, I'm not saying we should do anything. I know, Marcus said. I know what you're saying. They sat in silence for a long time after that. Lying in that bed, I understood that my children were not villains. This is the thing that made the situation more complicated than it would have been if they were. Villains are clean to deal with. What I had instead were two people who loved me and were afraid and had, under the pressure of that fear, begun making decisions in the space that my silence had created. The silence I had created. Good intentions and beneficial outcomes are not the same thing. I had seen too many families fractured by decisions made in grief before grief had finished doing its work. The question was not what my children intended. The question was what I was going to do about it. Day 11. I opened my eyes at 6:47 in the morning according to the clock on the wall. The nurse, a young man named Terrell, whose voice I had come to recognize over the course of the week, made a sound of genuine surprise and pressed the call button. Dr. Pettigrew arrived within minutes. She asked me simple questions. My name, the year, the name of the current president, whether I could feel her squeezing my hand. I answered everything correctly. She stood at the foot of my bed and smiled the way doctors smile when they have been worried and can now stop worrying. Raymond, she said, welcome back. I looked at the ceiling for a moment. How long? I asked. My voice was barely there. 11 days of a tube had taken most of it. 11 days. I closed my eyes briefly. I heard things, I said. She nodded slowly. That's not uncommon. Auditory awareness during reduced sedation. We can talk about what that experience was like. I heard my family, I said. She was quiet. Is there someone I can call for you? She asked. Yes, I said. But not my family. Not yet. The person I asked for was not Camille. Not Marcus. Not Dennis. It was my attorney, a woman named Gloria Tanner who had handled Dolores's estate and had been telling me for 3 years that I needed to update my own documents. I had told her I would get to it. I had not gotten to it. She arrived the following morning. She sat beside my bed with a yellow legal pad and a pen and listened without interrupting while I told her everything I had heard. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Are you angry? She asked. I thought about the question seriously. No, I said. I'm clear. What do you mean? I mean, I understand exactly what needs to happen, and I know why it didn't happen before. She nodded. What do you want to do? I want to fix what I left unwritten, I said, before I talk to anyone else. Over the next 4 days, still in the hospital, still attached to monitoring equipment, I worked with Gloria to do what I should have done 8 years ago when Dolores died. I updated my will, clearly and specifically, with language that left no gaps for interpretation. The house was not to be sold unless I chose to sell it or became permanently incapacitated as determined by 2 independent physicians. The retirement account had clear allocation instructions. The life insurance policy, the one that had been sitting in my file cabinet, was re-examined, and the beneficiary designations, which had still listed Dolores, were updated. I was not punishing Camille or Marcus. Both of them were in the will, equitably. What I was doing was removing the gaps, filling the spaces where assumption had been living instead of instruction. I also did something I had not done before. I wrote a letter, not a legal document. A personal letter, the kind you write when you want someone to understand not just what you decided but why. I wrote one for Camille and one for Marcus, and I addressed the specific conversations I had overheard, not to shame them, but to acknowledge that what I had heard was real, and that I understood where it came from, and that I was not going to pretend the last 11 days had not happened. Gloria read both letters after I wrote them. These are good, she said. They're honest, I said. That's the best I can do. Camille arrived on the morning of day 15. She walked into the room and saw me sitting up and made a sound that was not a word, just the sound of someone's chest releasing something it had been holding too tightly for too long. She hugged me carefully, the way you hug someone who is still fragile, and when she pulled back, her eyes were full. Dad, she said. We were so scared. I know, I said. Sit down, sweetheart. There's something I need to give you. I handed her the letter. She looked at it. The envelope had her name on it in my handwriting, which was shakier than it used to be, but still mine. What is this? A letter. Read it when you get home. Not here. She held it in both hands the way people hold something they are not sure about. Dad, she said. Are you all right? I'm getting there, I said. But I need you to understand something first. She looked at me. I heard some things, I said, while I was asleep. I can't explain exactly how, and I'm not going to argue about whether it's possible. I know what I heard. Her expression changed. Very slightly, but I had been reading faces for 30 years. What did you hear? She asked. Enough, I said. Enough to know that I left too much unwritten. And that's on me, Camille. Not on you. But I fixed it now. The letter will explain. She looked at the envelope again. Dad, if you thought that we were. I don't think you're a bad person, I said. I never thought that. I just think that when people are scared and grieving, and there's an empty space where instructions should be, they fill it with their own fears. That's not a character flaw. That's what human beings do. Her eyes filled completely. I'm sorry, she said. It came out very quietly. I know you are, I said. I'm sorry too, for leaving the space. Marcus came the following afternoon. He sat in the chair by the window. I recognized the position now that I could see, and he looked at me the way he had looked at me when he was 9 years old at his grandmother's funeral, like a man who needed to cry and did not know how to start. I handed him his letter. He looked at the envelope. I need to tell you something, he said before he opened it. I know, I said. I called someone about the house. He said it to the window, not to me. A real estate agent. He stopped. I told myself it was just information, just knowing the number. But it wasn't just that. I waited. I'm in debt, he said. Bad. I haven't told you because I knew what you'd say. I knew you'd want to help, and I knew how you'd help, and I knew it wasn't. I knew it wasn't right to come to you again. How much? I asked. He told me. I sat with the number for a moment. You brought someone to the hospital, I said. Someone from the real estate office. He looked at me sharply. How did you? I heard things, I said. While I was under. He stared at me. That's not Dad, that's not possible, I said. Maybe not, but I know what I heard. He rubbed his face with both hands. He sat for a long time without speaking. I'm sorry, he finally said. I don't even, he stopped. There's no explanation for it. That doesn't make me look like a terrible person. You're not a terrible person, I said. You're a desperate person. There's a difference. He looked at the envelope in his hands. What's in this? Read it at home, I said. And then call me. We're going to talk about your situation honestly. For the first time, I want to tell you what the letter said, because I think the letter is the most important part of this story. It did not say, I know what you did. It did not say, I am disappointed in you. What it said, what I tried to say in both letters, was something more like this. I spent 11 days in a condition that I cannot entirely explain. I heard things I was not supposed to hear. And what I heard showed me that I had failed at something fundamental, not as a father, but as a responsible adult. I left my affairs unwritten. I let decades pass without putting into writing the things that mattered. I assumed that people who loved me would naturally understand my intentions, and I was wrong. Love does not come with a map of someone else's wishes. It comes with the hope that the map exists. I did not provide the map. I am providing it now. What I heard from you does not change how I feel about you. But I want you to know I heard it, because I think it matters for your sake and for mine that we stop pretending the last 11 days did not happen. I am not inviting an apology. I am inviting honesty. The honesty that does not require someone to be unconscious before it can be said. Come talk to me. Not about the house. Not about the money. About what you're afraid of. About what you need. About what we've never said because we assumed there was more time. There is still time. I am, apparently, not going anywhere yet. Dad. The following weeks were not simple. Recovery is not simple. Conversations that have been avoided for years are not simple just because a crisis has made them unavoidable. But we had them. Dennis came with Camille one afternoon and sat across from me in the hospital room and told me things he had never said directly about the financial pressure they were under, about his anxiety about Camille's parents' generation and what provision for aging parents looked like, about his own father's decline and what it had cost his family. He was stiff about it. He is not a naturally vulnerable man. But he said the things. I listened. I did not interrupt. I had 11 days of practice. Marcus and I had a longer conversation. 2 of them. Actually, one in the hospital and one after I came home. He told me about the debt, which was real and serious and needed addressing. We talked about it the way we should have been talking about things for years, directly, with the recognition that pride costs more than the things it protects. I did not solve his financial problem. I helped him find a path towards solving it himself. There is a difference, and it is a difference he needed to understand. Camille and I talked about what she had said, not to accuse her, but to hear her explain it in her own words, from the space of honesty rather than the space of crisis. She did. She was more honest than I expected. She told me she had been afraid for a long time, not just in the hospital, but in the years before, watching me age, watching the house become something she associated with Dolores's illness, watching me refuse to talk about the future. You never talk about it, she said. You changed the subject. I know, I said. You taught me to plan. You always said plan ahead. But you never planned ahead for yourself. I know, I said again. She was right. Telling someone to do something you do not do yourself is a blindness I had somehow avoided recognizing in myself for 63 years. I came home on a Thursday in late March. Patricia Osei was in her front yard and waved when my car pulled into the driveway. I got out slowly, with a cane, and walked to the fence between our properties. You scared me, she said. You saved my life, I said. She waved this away. I just made a phone call. That's all it was, I said. That's all it took. She looked at me with the expression of someone who has lived long enough to know when a person has changed. You look different, she said. I feel different, I said. She nodded. Good or bad? I thought about the hospital bed, about the voices, about the letters and the conversations and the 30 years of documentation I had finally put in order. Good, I said. The kind of difference that costs something but leaves you cleaner. She nodded again, the way she did when she had decided a conversation was complete. Welcome home, Raymond, she said. There's soup on. Come over if you want some. Most families are not conspiring against each other. Most families are simply afraid of loss, of inadequacy, of the silence that follows when someone who has always been present is suddenly not. And when afraid people are placed in an information vacuum, they fill it with their own worst assumptions. They plan around grief before grief has finished arriving. They make calculations that embarrass them later. This is not a reason to despair about human nature. It is a reason to be clear. Put things in writing. Not because your children will betray you, because you love them too much to leave them in the dark. Tell people what you want while you can still tell them. Tell people what you're afraid of while there is still time to be heard. Have the conversation you have been avoiding for 10 years before circumstances have it for you in a hospital room, through a fog of sedation, while you are lying still and they believe you cannot hear. Because here is what I know now, from 11 days on the other side of consciousness. People reveal themselves in the silence they believe is empty. And sometimes the most important thing a person can do is be the one who is listening. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I still volunteer. The headaches are gone. My blood pressure is managed. I walk with a cane that I resent mildly and intend to eventually not need. The house is mine. I have not sold it. I am not going to sell it until I am ready, and I have made that clear in writing. Junior came over last Sunday, and we sat on the porch, and he told me everything that had happened at school in the past 3 weeks, in the breathless detail of a 7-year-old who has stored up news and cannot release it fast enough. I listened to all of it. Listening, it turns out, is something you can get better at. If this story made you think about what you've been putting off, the will, the conversation, the things you've been assuming people already know, I hope you don't wait for a Tuesday night emergency to have them. If this reminded you of a family member who passed without saying what needed to be said, or a moment when you learned something about the people you love that changed how you saw them, tell me about it in the comments. I read them all. Hit like and subscribe for more stories about what people reveal when they think no one is watching. And remember, silence is not safety. Clarity is.